How do we restore control to Americans? How do we give them a sense of agency? How do we give them pathways forward? And how do we paint a vision of the future that's both hopeful and positive and has enough for everybody where we all come together?
Hi, and welcome to Keeping Watch, the show that decodes Florida politics while holding elected officials accountable. I'm Natasha Sutherland. In today's episode, we're going to discuss what goes behind policymaking, politics, and all the nitty-gritty. Well, research. Plus, we're going to talk about what's been going on in Tallahassee with these lawmakers this week. But first, I do want to talk about what has been going on this week. I think it's really important for us to understand all the crazy things that are happening. And so just this week, the Florida Senate passed their 6-week abortion ban, which effectively bans abortions because a lot of folks do not know that they are pregnant at that time, right? Not to mention things like women who have irregular cycles or, other medical issues or concerns. And so it's something where, yes, there is that window of time, but it really isn't enough time to be able to do anything or decide anything, much less deal with the waiting periods and that sort of thing. So really what's been happening in Florida is incrementally every single chance that the folks here get, they have looked to ban abortion. And so last session, it was 15 weeks with no exceptions. This session, it is now 6 weeks. Looks like it passed 26-13 with, believe it or not, a couple of Republicans against it, probably because they are not in safe seats, right? And so that's interesting to think about. But next, it is headed to the House. And then once it passes the House, which it likely will because there is a Republican supermajority here in the state of Florida, in the state legislature, it will then go on to the governor for signature. And the governor did indicate in the past that he would support such a measure. And so that is incredibly scary to think about in the state of Florida, and especially for the Southeast in the United States, as Florida has been historically one of the few places that has abortion care available to individuals. And now they're going to take that away. And so what that means is the people that will have access to it are those of means, people that are able to fly out of the Southeast of the United States and still get the care that they need, leaving the rest of us here high and dry and potentially very dangerously affected because, there are issues that people can have medically with it. And, it's something that's going to put people in a really, really bad position. It's already difficult enough to access health care in the state of Florida for folks that don't have the means. And now they're just taking away another option. And really, when it comes to any medical decision, it really should be left to the patient, their doctor, right? And maybe their family if that's a part of their decision-making process. But this is a very dangerous precedent that we are setting here in the state for politicians, for lawmakers, for the governor to make choices for you about your health care. We start here, but where does it end, right? We're seeing the same sort of parallels when it comes to gender-affirming care as well. Recently, though, because of this, looks like, I'm just looking through the articles here, Florida Democratic Party Chair Nikki Fried and Senate Minority Leader Lauren Book were arrested with nearly a dozen other individuals at Tallahassee City Hall protesting this very same bill, the 6-week abortion ban. Looks like there has been some video that surfaced around it. Protesters were placed in handcuffs. And yeah, not good. I mean, it's just for folks to be able to, at a minimum, right, you're taking our rights away. We want to be able to use the right of free speech to let you know how we feel, and we get arrested. So that's what's going on here in the state of Florida.
Since you are here enjoying our show, please make sure to follow us on all of our socials so you can experience all Florida Watch and Keeping Watch news and information. We are at Florida Watch on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube. While you're at it, check out our website at floridawatch.org and our partner website at progressflorida.org.
All right, so moving to the rest of today's episode, as I mentioned, we will be talking about policymaking, the behind the scenes parts of it, what goes into where lawmakers might even get their ideas, where other policymakers get their ideas and strategists and things like that. And it is research. I am so excited to have Gretchen Barton on. She is principal at Worthy Strategy Group. And she's going to talk to us a little bit about the work that she does, how that research that she does informs the work that a lot of other people in the world of politics do. And then after that, we'll have Bernice Lauredan, Director of Voter Engagement for Dream Defenders, which is part of Florida for All, to provide us with the most recent legislative update.
Nothing changes in local or national politics unless you vote. And due to recent changes in Florida law, all requests for vote-by-mail ballots expired at the end of 2022. To continue to receive an absentee ballot and be able to vote by mail, contact your local supervisor of elections at myfloridaelections.com/contact-your-SOE and request your absentee ballot today.
So next up, we have a very special guest. I know I say that every time, but she's very special, Gretchen, and she is a researcher. At the Hub, we work with her actually quite a bit, and I think that what she has to say is going to be really, really interesting, specifically around what we do with the research that we find out about people, about voters, and how we translate that into the work that we do, the messaging that we put out, and so on. Welcome, Gretchen. Hey.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here. It's very exciting.
It's great to have you. So for folks that maybe aren't familiar, one of the things that I find myself going back and forth about is before we jump into like who you are, just research in general, qualitative research, quantitative, just think through that for a minute about what all that is, because for me, I get really confused. But first, tell us who you are and about your work.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Gretchen Barton. I'm principal at Worthy Strategy Group, former research director at Future Majority, qualitative researcher extraordinaire. I'm originally from upstate New York, and I love stories. I love hearing people's stories and people's hearts. My husband teases me because I always ask tons of questions at the dinner table and everywhere else. And he's like, oh my God, you ask so many questions. But honestly, this is my dream work, to be able to ask people questions and hear about how they think and feel about the world, how they work, how they operate, why they think and feel as they do. And then of course, on the political level, how it manifests into our political reality. I do a lot of deep qualitative research, though I advise on quant as well. Qualitative research is research that uses a lot of open-ended, it's like a fishing expedition. It's a lot of open-ended questions. It can be interviews or focus groups, asking people their thoughts and feelings about a variety of topics, and then seeing where it goes. They tend to have smaller samples, but they tend to be really deep and rich. In the corporate world, they call it thick data. Which is kind of fun. They call quantitative research big data. So you need both big and thick. This is very American.
Not little and thick. Where's that data? Data.
So thick data. I feel like I'm going to go hide under my desk now. But thick data. Big data is all about looking at a huge sample size, like thousands of people, to validate the wild and crazy ideas that people come up with in interviews and focus groups. So for example, someone in Qual might say, I really think that our presidential platform should include healthcare for everybody, right? And we go, well, that sounds good. That sounds good. Let's see if everyone else feels that way. And then we ask that question, how do you feel about healthcare for everybody in a large survey? And you say, okay, well, it turns out 97% of the population wants that. And so that's sort of how it works. Qual is quant, I feel, are absolutely essential together. They really are a wonderful complement, and people who do both of those things and work hand in hand, I think, are really embracing, the best of both worlds. They're understanding not only, what's happening on a large scale, but what are the actual questions that we should ask? How can we think differently about a thing? So yeah.
Okay, so research and the kind that you do, you basically like to get into people's heads. That's what it sounds like to me. I don't know why you didn't just go into therapy, but that's fine. That's a different episode. Talk about that another time. So quantitative, quantity, so number, like a large number, and then qualitative, I always think of quality, so like the depth, right, and kind of getting different ideas.
Yeah.
And is that kind of a good way to think about it
That's
in sort of a summary?
That's right. Great qualitative. That's right. Great qualitative research really looks like a therapy session. And sometimes it actually will really look like a therapy session. I can't tell you how many people I've been with crying. We've cried, we've laughed. It's very emotional. It's very tender. It's very deep. It's very intimate. And we spend a lot of time. I consider it. I'm a weirdo, but I'm almost quasi religious about it. I meditate before I do my interviews. I really believe in being as small as possible in the interviews. I've worked really hard to be spare and think very carefully about the words that I use and to mirror people. There's a lot to it. I watched the TV show Say Yes to the Dress. I don't know if you've seen it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Who
But
hasn't seen that?
right. So I think a lot about being the assistant to the bride. This is going to sound really gooby, but
I like it.
my interviewee is the bride. I'm the one to receive in the back. I'm all about serving them and their story. Whether I agree with it or not, it's all about my research subjects and bringing out their humanity, what they need, what they want, points of connection, their larger story. Because I think a lot of times, because, for efficiency's sake and for, just to expedite the process of going, right, we need to go after these people in the political world, or these people will say, okay, these people are with us, these people are not, and done. And there can, as a course of that, sometimes we can even say, these people are never with us, they suck. There's no redemption, and we're not going to talk to them ever, and leave them alone. And I kind of work against that. I really believe that everyone has points of humanity that we can connect with. Everyone has their better angels. And I'm looking for, shared connection and, maybe people are funky and they're weird, but maybe that just is a human need that needs addressing. And I can lift that up and go, this person, they really need structure. They just do. Kids need structure. They really need structure, and we need to give them the structure they need. And then when they have that, they can go and be in a better place politically. So,
Wow.
So yeah, I think it's really important to lift up people's stories, and to center their who they are and what they're about.
That sounds really interesting. One of the things I'm curious about is why research is important, specifically as it relates to politics and policymaking. Couldn't we just say what we want and just do whatever and, make whatever policies based on how we feel? Why do we need research?
For sure. So we could do that. We can do anything we want. It's America.
Well,
but we shouldn't. Right? Freedom. No. The reason that I think research is important is because ultimately politics is not about us. As researchers anyway. It's not about, it's about representation of who people are, what they need. It's about meeting people where they're at in a deeply emotionally resonant way and delivering what they want while addressing their fears and their needs. And I think I've seen this. I've seen different things. I've seen politicians who use research, politicians who don't. Those who don't often make their political career, and you see this in a lot of politicians who are out there today, about themselves, about their own career, their own mission, their own agenda, which may or may not match their constituency or the larger, where America's at. Research, however, gives people a shot of having their voices heard, of showing people not only what they need, but why they need it, how they like it, and what people should do about it.
Mm-hmm.
It's ultimately about centering people who live here, their experiences, their lived experiences, lifting them up and helping us understand how we can, better serve those people. So I think research is necessary for those reasons. I think, certainly people, a lot of politicians have a good gut feel, people who work in the space can have a really good gut feel. But I think the miss is sometimes when we kind of go, well, how I feel. And this is, based in psychology, right? There's like, you meet one person and you go, oh my God, that's how everybody feels. They agree with me and I
Right.
feel this way and they feel this way. Therefore, everyone feels this way. That's
Right.
just a normal human reaction. But that isn't necessarily the case. And I've learned over the time that I've been a researcher that, there are people I interview who I'm like, oh my gosh, oh no, oh, I disagree with you personally so much, right? But like that's okay. That's okay. That they are their own thing, and we have to understand those people. We have to understand people who are like us and unlike us, and then gradations in between.
Right.
So that's why research is really necessary, to get outside of ourselves and to remember that we're about serving others and not just our own interests.
Mm-hmm.
Although you can totally do the latter, and God bless you. So yeah.
Yeah, plenty of politicians I know that do that. And as you're talking about thinking about and learning about what people really feel, I wonder if we would need it if everybody just voted and told us how they felt that way, but they don't. A lot of people, not enough people vote to really show us how they feel for whatever reason. And I think that adds some color to maybe why they don't vote, why they feel like being a part of the process isn't for them. And so I think I think that makes a lot of sense.
I think that's true, Natasha. And if I can build off of what you just said, a lot of people don't vote. But in our voting process, it's sort of an imperfect process for multiple reasons. I don't need to tell you this, right? We have the Electoral College.
Mm-hmm.
We have money in politics. We are voting for people, not specific policies, right? We know that 70% of Americans agree on a broad range of issues. Like 70% is a lot. But we have sort of a 50-50 split on the federal level between Democrats and Republicans. We're voting for people that represent a cluster of ideas and personalities. We're not voting really a reflection of who we are and what we want. We're voting for people. And that really, the process does not give us a true ability to represent how we think and feel about the issues.
Mm-hmm.
If we did, and I'm not saying we should, I really have not thought about this too much, but if we did, we would have a truer read, I think, on a lot of the issues today. And frankly, I've seen a lot of people get discouraged by politics. People, I did a study of young voters, and one of the things that I saw, people who were young and energized to vote and regular voters, they had this whole unconscious, hopeful rebel thing, which was cool. People brought in images. I use a lot of images in my work of Katniss Everdeen, of all the Star Wars iterations, of Rocky. Yeah, we used this a lot in 2020 in a lot of different places for campaigns. And it was this idea of, I am but one, but there are legion who may be invisible to me, but there are legion around me who will come alongside me, and we will infiltrate the system and transform it through our actions. That was the mental model that they had. And that was used in a lot of political advertising to great effect. It matched the mental model that they had. The people who were not voters and young, they talked a lot about the disconnection that they would feel when they voted. They feared getting into that political fray. They saw it as a negative space where people are just duking it out, not moving towards any sort of solutions. They didn't want to be a part of it. They didn't want to be a part of the disconnection. They didn't want to lose friends or family. And so, of course, that led us to, another kind of intervention to help people address that. But really, there are a lot of people that look at politics. They see people duking it out. They see people not working together. They don't see a vision of the future, and they don't feel like there's a role there for them.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot that we can do. I'm not pulling my hair out yet in terms of, getting people out to vote. There's a lot we can do to address people's needs.
Yeah, no, that's great. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of take what you're saying around the information that we get, the stories that you learn from people, sort of all the depths and the layers behind where people are when it comes to policymaking and things like that. And when you get those stories, how do we draw conclusions from that to inform the work that we do?
All right. Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of things that we look at in the research. In my own work and where these strategy groups work, we're looking at a lot of different things in a lot of different ways. We're ultimately looking for patterns to start. We look at imagery, we look at words that people use. We listen to soundtracks that people bring into us. We look at videos. We're looking for patterns, visually, vibe. What's coming up as a pattern.
Vibe?
So Mhm.
Did you say vibe?
Vibe.
Oh man.
I
All
did
right.
say vibe. Is it?
I gotta tell our comms director Anders, because he is big on vibes.
Xanders loves the vibe.
Sorry, I didn't mean to jump in. He
No, vibe is huge.
vibes are huge. Go for it. Talk
Listen,
about it.
you win campaigns on vibe. You do. In fact, I've worked on campaigns. Okay, I'll tell you a story if you don't mind.
Please, yeah.
When I was younger, a few years ago, I was in Girl State, which was super fun. It was a high school. I don't know if you know about it. It's like this thing where you maybe you did it. It was this thing where you go to the state capitol and you pretend to form a government and we had to form different political parties. And essentially we formed everybody wanted the same thing, which was really funny. It was I don't know, the Green Party and the Yellow Party, right? And we were all we want transportation and we want everyone to have enough food. Everyone wanted the same platform, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I will say, this is not every single campaign, but there are often these primary campaigns where you'll see 12 Democrats up against each other. And they're all we want healthcare and everyone should be treated better and education is good and da 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 da.
Mm-hmm.
And there might be some differences, but not really. Maybe. This is where I think it's really critical to do this kind of work and get the vibe right. And in fact, I've worked on a campaign recently where my job, I pulled images from across a certain location. It's a secret campaign I'm working on, but I pulled from across this location. I pulled in videos and images of here's the state of the city. Here's the future of the city that I want. Here's songs of what it will take to get better. We analyzed everything. We looked at the chords and the music. We looked at the color palette of the videos and the images and everything to understand what is the world that they're living in, right? What are these city residents living in? Are they living in, just to be silly here, are they living in the Anne of Green Gables world where it's all frilly and doilies and pink and lacy and flowers? Is that the world they're living in? Are they living in a gritty world? Are they living in a superhero world? What is the tone? What is the vibe? What is the music? What are the shades of understanding that we can reflect back, as, candidate, but also as communicators. So we kind of show we get you, we understand, we're inhabiting the world that we're living in, we're matching it, and then use that to tell the story, reflect back the story that they want. So again, we ask, what's the future that you want? What does that look like? How does that feel? What does it smell like? What does it taste like? What is it? Everything. So we can really understand in a 360-degree way, how do we match the story in their heads in a really deeply resonant way. Mm-hmm. And so the data that we gather as a result of this work, it can go into a campaign, the comms, the feel and the tone and the policies and the words. That can all lead into things. It can also go into just standard things people want, we have one question that we've done in Florida a bunch of asking, if you had a magic wand, what kind of legislation would you pass that would deeply impact your life, right?
Yeah.
A lot of different ideas there, but all of them sort of centering around the idea of finance and safety, right? So that's a pattern that we can identify. And we go, at the end of the day, the things that are most critical to people, this is how they're thinking about it. This is what they want. They want to be financially secure. They want to be safe. And this is how we can couch our messages. So it's really about finding those patterns in every way possible, and then reflecting it back in terms of candidate platforms, in terms of party messaging, all of that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Because, people want to feel like you're for them, you're for what they want. in order to bring them to, your side of things. So yeah, I appreciate that. That's really interesting too. When you were going through all the different senses too, I thought that was fascinating. The smells and,
It
all of that. That's cool.
Yeah, it can get a little weird. And I mean, qual is a fishing expedition. It can be a little bit wacky. Bless the people who sort of retain qual, folks like me, and kind of are like okay with getting into the weird space. But we're just trying to understand people in the language that they best speak. Some people, I've never done interpretive dance before with a participant. I don't see that in my future. But some people express themselves best physically. Some people express themselves best through imagery, some through words, some through data. And what we're trying to do is just filter through as many ways as possible for people to express themselves and tell us their story.
That reminds me of being a teacher. So a little bit about me. I was a teacher once. That.
Love that.
And when you talked about, first of all, the different sensory experiences and the different ways of expression, makes me think of the different ways that students learn. There are the learners that prefer to learn through physical action, the learners that need visuals, the ones that need to hear something, that sort of thing. And then the second thing that really connects to being an educator with what you're saying is the need for safety. And I think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And so in order for a student to be able to learn, they need to have their basic needs met. They need to not be hungry sitting in your classroom. They need to feel safe in the classroom. There are all of these things that you have to attend to before they're able to learn. And so I think, our government, it's the same thing. We need our communities to have these basic needs covered before people are able to really feel comfortable to flourish and to thrive and to do well and realize their version of, the American dream or whatever you want to call it. So that gives me a lot to think about. So with that, when you talk to us about, you did talk a little bit about what people need to hear in our messages, but is there anything that you found to be sort of a pattern in what people like to hear in messaging? What do we got for that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one of the biggest trends I think that we see, there are a lot of things happening, but one of the things that I'm really hot for talking about is talking about Americans as the hero of the story. It is so critical to me from all that I've seen across the United States that Americans are centered both in policy and action as the people who are coming along and making this nation better. A lot of times, in the way that media communicates, the way that our politicians communicate, we center the party, we center the government. The government is the hero, and that's not how people think. Hero culture is huge in the United States.
Yeah.
People want to be seen, they want to be safe, they want to be centered. And talking about how Americans are important, they're considered, they thought of, they matter is critical. One of the findings that, while I was with the Future Majority, we did a national survey where we asked people, do you feel like you matter in the United States? Mm-hmm. And 65% of Americans said that they didn't feel like they mattered at all. Yeah. Which is messed up. We got to do better than that.
Yeah, no, that's really sad. You said 65%?
65%. Wow. Yeah. And Americans did not feel in control of things that they want to be in control of. So one of the things that we know from research is if you reach out to the government, it takes 43 days on average for the government to get back to you, which is a long time, right? When you ask people where they have a feeling of control, they feel like they have some kind of control or they're able to get a call back from corporations. They have some control over their community. They have some control over their kids. And 4% feel like they have any control over the government at all. 4%. Wow. And so it's something that really underpins a lot of our messaging. How do we restore control to Americans? How do we give them a sense of agency? How do we give them pathways forward? And how do we paint a vision of the future that's both hopeful and positive and has enough for everybody where we all come together? A lot of times I feel, and I've seen, where people will talk about the future in a lot of fearful terms. And interestingly, Democrats are associated strongly with the future. So this is like really important for us. Mm-hmm. When people talk about the future, they're afraid of a lot of things. And this is from Democrats to Republicans across the board. They're fearful of robots taking their jobs. Shout out to ChatGPT.
All right. Yeah. Man.
Yeah. They're afraid of messing up the earth. Again, Democrats to Republicans, afraid consistently across the board. They've messed up the earth. They're afraid, right? Right? You see evidence of it everywhere. And even if people are not on board with like climate change, they're on board with like something's wrong here. And people are afraid of that. People are afraid of messing up their kids, of indebting their kids, of trapping their kids in a world that doesn't give them an opportunity to succeed. And they're really, really afraid of, and this is kind of a weird, funky one, of being fully disconnected from their communities and then also their history. This is all kinds of things. We could talk about this for hours, but I call it wisdom of the generations. Basically, there's this disconnect that a lot of people are feeling these days between themselves and their children, between their grandparents. People feel like we're not doing this sacred passed down thing that we should. And there's a lot to say about this, but they have all of these fears and they're being exploited by a lot of Republicans, quite frankly. When we have those fears, they're not addressed and we don't paint a hopeful, positive vision of the future, which looks a lot like abundance, having enough for everybody. It looks like coming together. People are holding hands. It looks a lot like, having a seat at the table for everybody. I can't tell you, when I ask people to bring in images of their like ideal future vision of America, it is always, I've seen this so many times across America, a long table outside, diverse. Everyone is sitting at some kind of feast. They're talking and interacting with each other and everyone's happy. That's the ideal future, where we're able to listen to each other and talk and work together. And we're able to work together on some of the biggest challenges today and come out stronger as heroes. Americans really embrace that hero legacy and they want to be a part of that. And so finding ways for us to tell that story, I feel like is really critical, both to address the concerns they have about the future and the fears, but also to give people a sense of where we're going. I think the things that have been really interesting in my time researching Florida, one, Ron DeSantis being seen as a father figure for a lot of voters, which is wild. But interesting. They really see him as someone who's supposed to protect them and to keep them financially secure, to push them harder, because they sort of see Florida as sort of an unruly state. Someone talked about Florida as like their bad boyfriend that needs to be like put in line, and DeSantis was going to go do that. People are weird, but that was one thing that was really funky and interesting. Another thing is, and we did this recently, we talked about gender, and we asked people to share their questions that they might ask somebody who knew what they were talking about when it came to gender. And we asked people from across the board, from left to right, how they, what kinds of questions they might have. Something that was really interesting, where a lot of these questions show that we have a lot of narrative territory that's open space. People had a lot of questions. They were a lot of like, why does gender matter anyway? Is binary important? I don't really know what's going on. And it really indicated that there's a further conversation that needs to be had. And there's a lot of people of goodwill who kind of see it, but they're just confused and need some help to kind of think through it, safely. And then lastly, there's family finances and freedom came up in Florida quite a lot in our most recent story as sort of key frames for people, very particular to Florida, but very useful in terms of when you think about those who've been successful politically in the state and how they leverage those to communicate with voters. So, yeah.
Explains the Ron DeSantis freedom message.
Yes. He knows what he's doing, as crazy as it feels to. He gets Florida on some level. So, but of course there's some holes in them too. So we'll see how it works out.
So thank you so much, Gretchen. You've really taught us a whole lot about research, qualitative, quantitative, being the hero, and really the fact that as Americans, we have a lot more in common than we realize. So I just so appreciate you coming on the show today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So next, we're going to have Bernice Lauredan, Director of Voter Engagement for Dream Defenders, which is part of Florida for All, to provide us with a legislative update. And it's going to be all about education, so stay tuned.
Florida has faced a growing affordability crisis with the cost of rent, utility bills, and insurance going through the roof. All while Ron DeSantis has tried to divide us and distract us from the favors he does for his billionaire corporate donors to advance his political ambitions. DeSantis Watch is a project dedicated to shining a spotlight on the governor's failures of leadership that make all of us less free. Go to DeSantisWatch.org and join the movement.
Welcome back. I'd like to welcome Bernice to talk with us about what's going on with Florida's legislative session. Welcome, Bernice.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Can you tell us a little bit about your organization, Dream Defenders, and the work that you do for them, please?
Absolutely. So, Dream Defenders is a youth civil rights organization. We are focused on safety and a good life for folks across the state of Florida, and we will soon be expanding nationally, so that's really exciting. In my role, I am right now holding down the whole political department. So focused on legislative session as much as possible, obviously, as that's going on. Trying to make sure that our membership understands what's happening during legislative session, and also that we're active and participating as much as possible to be a voice against these terrible bills that are coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned membership. What is that, or who are your members, or can you talk a little bit about that too?
Absolutely. So our members are primarily youth across the state of Florida. Um, we're really focused on recruiting and supporting brown and black youth, um, and developing folks to really create change in their communities.
That's great. We definitely need organizations like yours mobilizing young people, especially in this state with all the things that have been going on. I mean, from the, the book banning stuff. I mean, it seems like education is really at the forefront of this legislative session. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about some of the stuff that you all at Dream Defenders are following this session.
So there's a couple bills around education that we're following. Um, Right now, we are focused on HB 999, or the MAGA University bill, as it's called. And really, this bill is incredibly harmful. It will completely overhaul our university system in Florida, eliminate any courses related to gender studies, which, funny enough, my sister actually got her degree in women and gender studies at University of South Florida, and soon that might not be an option that folks have here in our state
Wow.
at the public universities. So it eliminates teaching about critical race theory or intersectionality, which is so wild to me because college is really the place for you to learn and grow and develop your politic and understand more about the world, and understanding things like critical race theory and gender studies. Um, those are like basics. Like, I don't understand why they're trying to take those things away from us. Well, I do understand they're racist. But it is really just disappointing to see. The other thing that this bill would do is it would defund any like multicultural services. So any diversity, equity, um, and inclusion or critical race theory, they want to
Really?
ban completely. Yes, yeah. So lots of scary things happening. And, it's unfortunate that our state is going to suffer because folks are going to stop coming to universities here in Florida from out of state, is my opinion.
Yeah, I don't imagine there's going to be a significant sort of appeal if I mean, you mentioned the concept of intersectionality, and I wonder if you're able to sort of for folks that maybe don't understand what that might mean, maybe go into what that is, because I think that that's pretty revelatory, because like banning that to me is just insane. So if you could, what is intersectionality?
Yeah, yeah. Intersectionality, it's basically a lens to understand somebody's uh, social identity,
Right.
basically. So, how like race, class, and gender interact and impact an individual's life.
Yeah. So like I am intersectionality as a multiracial Black woman that identifies as, female, woman, she, her pronouns, and is also a child of immigrants, so first generation American. Like, so it's the intersection of so many different ways that we identify. And so what? We have to like
Mm-hmm.
study each piece in a vacuum and not think about how, from a social perspective, all of those different parts of my identity just aren't recognized together. Like, that's wild. How are they even going to regulate that? Even if
Yeah.
this were to pass, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I'm not sure, to be honest. And then another thing this bill does is it actually eliminates the tenure system.
Oh,
Um, and so politically appointed trustees will oversee all university hiring. And that's really scary because the whole purpose of the tenure system is to protect professors so they could research and teach about like really cool and interesting subjects and not be pressured to find like a job or that the university will kick them out. And so the fact that they want to have politically appointed trustees hiring the faculty is scary.
yeah, it sounds like anti-education freedom overall, right? They don't want you to be free to study what you want. They don't want professors to be free to do their jobs. They don't want us to be free to join clubs of interest, organizations that support all of the different, facets of identity. I just so I'm imagining that folks that are listening or watching right now find that infuriating, and they probably are wondering what can any of us do about it? How can we get involved?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's a couple ways that folks can get involved. Um, the first would be going to Tallahassee.
Okay.
Now, I would definitely tell y'all that I am not a fan of going to Tallahassee. It's a long drive, and there's just a weird energy there for me. I think because of how the legislature is set up and the just the overall Republican dominance of government is kind of like so I would say going to Tallahassee is one way, and actually testifying in front of the committees for this bill.
Hmm.
You could also address a letter to the committees as well if you're not able to actually go to Tallahassee. And then another way is to get involved with an organization like Dream Defenders. We're always looking to support folks to make a difference in legislative session and beyond. So definitely look into local organizations that you could be a part of.
Awesome. And I'm going to imagine that you all, as Dream Defenders, are going to have different, actions around this, or social media, that kind of thing. Is that right?
We will definitely have actions around this, and we are planning to be in Tallahassee to speak against the bill as well.
Oh, awesome. Okay, so if folks want to, they can get plugged in with you all at Dream Defenders and potentially be a part of that, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Is there anything else about session that you think folks need to be aware of for this past week? Any other surprising things that you want to share before we let you go?
I would just say the abortion bill is very, very scary. Um, at 6 weeks, it's a 6-week abortion ban.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if most people know that they're even pregnant at that point. Um, it's so early on. People don't find out until later sometimes. And it's just devastating to know that I won't be able to have full autonomy over my body in the state of Florida.
Yeah, agreed. And, it's when you say with the 6-week ban, it's effectively a ban, just straight up, right? Because of what you're saying around, the timing and things like that. And it is really scary because it's a dangerous precedent to set, right? For folks to not be able to make their own healthcare, medical decisions, and that politics has to be a part of that decision. So first it's abortions, but what's next, right? What other kinds of medical care or procedures? We have now the transgender care ban as well. So it's not even that it's just
Mm-hmm.
this one thing. And so I just, when you take it to its logical conclusion at a certain point, none of us is going to have control over anything to do with our bodies. And that is incredibly scary. So I appreciate you lifting that up and, encourage folks to, check out Dream Defenders website, their social media accounts, join them in their days of action here at the Capitol. Thank you so much, Bernice. We really appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you.
This show and all of our work would be impossible without your support. At Florida Watch, we do research, create graphics and video content, and keep an eye on issues that matter to all of us. We also work hard to keep things fun and informative with our goal to hold accountable extreme politicians like Ron DeSantis. Head over to floridawatch.org and click donate to support our cause to help keep up the fight to keep Florida educated, fair, and tolerant.
I want to remind our listeners that though a lot of what we talked about is a challenge to hear, a challenge to live through and endure, just remember that the night is darkest before dawn, and we really can't give up the fight. We cannot give up on Florida. There are a lot of great people out there that are working really hard to protect all of our rights and make sure that, Florida is a place for all of us to live, to grow, and to thrive. As always, if you have any questions for us at Keeping Watch, please send us an email at podcast@floridawatch.org. And be sure to join us next time on Keeping Watch. Take care. See you soon.